Hey guys, this is your week 2 rundown video. So in this video, I'm going to be explaining the assignments that you'll find underneath the week 2 module on Google Classroom. So as always, you'll start with number 1, the Start Here rundown video that you're watching now. After this video, you should be prepared to move on to the assignments. So this week, we are moving from analyzing elements in horror films to analyzing those same elements but in literature. So we're going to start with 2 short stories this week, and both of those stories are by Roald Dahl. The first is Lamb to the Slaughter, and the second is Landlady. I know, you guys, that we've already read Lamb to the Slaughter. We read it around Halloween time. However, when we read that story, it wasn't really to analyze the text. We were practicing collaborative reading circles using that story. And so we didn't really dive into it and analyze it much. I also remember that many of you really enjoyed it. And so I was really excited to put it on the reading list for this unit. So in order to access the assignment, you're just going to click on it and read the instructions, and then open the assignment. All right, guys, all of the texts that we're reading in this unit are going to have the same sort of layout, okay? So the title's up top, Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl, and it was written in 1953. Every single text that I assign, any story, poem, whatever, I will give you the link to the audio version. So if you want to listen along, you can click this link and it will open up YouTube.
Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl.
And you can listen along to the story being read as you read on this page. But I do request that you have this page open and that you're reading along as you listen. Okay? So the instructions: read the story and use your highlight tools and the space on the left to stop and jot. Your stop and jot notes should demonstrate your deep and critical thinking about the text versus simply reading. You may listen to the audio version, click the link above, but please have this text open and read along. And 3, when you have finished reading, answer the discussion questions located below the story. So, pretty self-explanatory, and it should be really familiar because we spent a lot of time on stop and jot when we did our novel study before school closures. So the stop and jots are the same. Anytime you notice in the text an important character or an event, you should highlight it or notate it in the space. If you have questions or if you are confused by something, you can highlight that as well and notate it in the side. Any patterns that you're noticing that could potentially be, who knows, maybe foreshadowing of some kind. Any predictions or inferences that you make in the text, and then any clues or foreshadowing. So all of these are excellent reasons to stop and jot, but of course there are so many other reasons to stop and jot. If you're able to make some kind of connection, like, oh, this part of the story is a lot like this other story that I read, those are really important connections, and you can write those in this space as well. Okay? Also, in the instructions, I ask you to use your highlight tools. I've highlighted these. You can use these colors for these specific notations if you want. You don't have to. It's really up to you. In case you don't know where to access your highlight tool, it is here. So if you want to highlight something like, for example, right off the bat, I see that the fact that this story was written in 1953 to me is important. Sometimes the date a story is written can provide really important context to better understand the story. So if you find something that's important or find something that's worth notating in the text, you're just going to take your cursor and highlight it, drag it along the text to make it blue, and then access your highlight tools up here. It should look something like this. Click on it and you can select a particular color, or if you want to unhighlight something, you can hit none, but that's where you'll access your highlight tool. Okay, so I'm going to get us started. I'll read maybe the first page or so and demonstrate the strategy that I want you guys to practice, okay? The living room was warm, the curtains were closed, the 2 table lamps were lit. On the one cupboard behind her, there were 2 glasses and some drinks. Mary Maloney was waiting for her husband to come home from work. Now and again she glanced at the clock, but without anxiety. She merely wanted to satisfy herself that each minute that went by made it nearer the time when he would come home. As she bent over her sewing, she was curiously peaceful. This was her 6th month expecting a child. Her mouth and her eyes, with their new calm look, seemed larger and darker than before. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Again, you don't have to stop at every single break, but maybe every solid passage, stop and just reflect on what you've read. First of all, I noticed right away we have a character's name. So that's important to note. I'm just going to use this one here. We know that the main character, at least so far, is Mary Maloney. We know that she seems like she's a pretty doting housewife. Again, that's why the date is really important, because in 1953 that was often the case. We know that she's also pregnant. This was her 6th month expecting a child. I think that that's probably important information, so I'm going to highlight that as well. Her mouth and her eyes, with their new calm look, seemed larger and darker than before. I think I'm also just going to write here in the I'm just going to write here in the side in the Stop and Jot space. She seems pretty devoted and in love. I think that's important to know. I wonder if that's going to play some kind of important role as the story continues. Let's see. When the clock said 10 minutes to 5, she began to listen, and a few moments later, punctually as always, she heard the car tires on the stones outside, the car door closing, footsteps passing the window, the key turning in the lock. She stood up and went forward to kiss him as he entered. "Hello, darling," she said. "Hello," he answered. She took his coat and hung it up. Then she made the drinks, a strong one for him and a weak one for herself. And soon she was back again in her chair with the sewing, and he was in the other chair holding the tall glass, rolling it gently so that the ice knocked musically against the side of the glass. Okay, I'm going to stop there. First of all, something I noticed is she called him hello, darling, and he simply said hello. That's interesting, and I wonder if this could be like an element of foreshadowing. Maybe something important is about to come. So here I said that foreshadowing is orange. Again, you guys, the color is just for me. I think it's easy when I'm annotating a text to have specific colors that represent specific notes, but it's up to you how you want to annotate your text. It's totally up to you. I also noticed in this passage that I just read, I have a question about the drinks that she made for her and her husband. It says here that she made a weak one for herself. But isn't she pregnant? So here I have questions should be in yellow. Again, don't stress the colors if it's too overwhelming for you, but I find that really interesting. And again, that could be why it's important to consider the date. Maybe back in 1953, people didn't realize that you shouldn't be drinking alcohol when you're pregnant. All right. For her, this was always a wonderful time of day. She knew he didn't want to speak much until the first drink was finished, and she was satisfied to sit quietly, enjoying his company after the long hours alone in the house. She loved the warmth that came out of him when they were alone together. She loved the shape of his mouth, and she especially liked the way he didn't complain about being tired. Okay, let's stop here. Again, I'm just noticing that she's incredibly doting. Like we see that here. She took his coat and she made him drinks. That is a pattern that I'm noticing. So I'm going to highlight that green. And then again here. She was satisfied to sit quietly and enjoying his company. So what I'm highlighting now is just what I'm noticing is coming up again and again and again. And it's this tendency that she has to just kind of sit and wait on him or wait for him. Tired, darling? Yes, he sighed. I'm thoroughly exhausted. And as he spoke, he did an unusual thing. He lifted his glass and drank it down in one swallow, although there was still half of it left. He got up and went slowly to get himself another drink. I'll get it, she cried, jumping up. Sit down, he said. Okay. Again, I'll get it. She's just so excited to help him and wait on him. So that's a pattern I'm noticing. But here's something I'm questioning a little bit. I'm thoroughly exhausted, and as he spoke, he did an unusual thing. An unusual thing. I'm wondering if what we are about to read is some kind of a clue or foreshadowing. So in that case, I'm going to highlight it orange. He did an unusual thing. He lifted his glass and drank it down in one swallow, got up and went slowly to get himself another drink. Okay, so this is something I think worth noting. First of all, he seems to be drinking more and faster. Is he stressed? Is he angry? Maybe he has bad news. Okay. Yeah, so you're going to sort of follow the same strategy as you're moving through the story. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. If you're somebody that prefers to hear the story all the way through first and then go back and look for some of these things here, that's fine. That's totally acceptable. Or if you're like me and you like to sort of stop and jot as you go, then that's fine as well. But my hope is that as opposed to simply reading, you are demonstrating to me that you're analyzing the text and you're looking specifically for these sort of notes, important characters or events, questions, patterns, predictions, clues, but also considering the 4 elements of horror. So what kind of conflict do you see? How does the author build suspense? Are there plot twists? And where do you see foreshadowing? Once you're finished with this, at the very bottom of the story, there are some discussion questions here. So make sure you're taking some time to answer those as well. Just a few short sentences will do it. I'm not expecting solid paragraphs, whatever works for you. And again, I recognize that this looks really long and intense, but it's only because the story itself is only taking up this half of the story. It will go quickly. Okay? If you have any questions about how to go about your close reading assignments, feel free to email me, or we can talk about it in office hours on Zoom. Once you're finished with this close reading assignment, you're going to go back to the modules and do the same thing for the landlady. You're going to notice that it's set up in the same exact format, sort of reading guide format. The link for this story so that you can listen to the audio is here, and you're going to practice those same strategies on this story and then answer the discussion questions at the end. When you're finished, go back to your Google Classroom, and the very last assignment for this week is, of course, the Flipgrid. Read the prompt and access Flipgrid using the link. In this Flipgrid, you're going to be discussing how you see the elements of horror, so conflict, foreshadowing, building suspense, and plot twists in the 2 stories that we read this week. If you have any questions, reach out to me. Good luck, and I am looking forward to hearing your Flipgrid responses.